we're going to talk about the inverse property. The inverse property actually has two different operations that it can work with. The first that we're going to look at is addition. The inverse property of addition tells us that any number plus its opposite will equal 0. So if you have any number and you take the opposite, or you change the sign to it, you will get 0. So let's try plugging in a number for this. Let's try v equals 5. So if I plug in 5 for v, and then I add, I'm not just adding 5 now, I'm adding negative 5 because this is the opposite of the sign. 5 plus negative 5 equals 0. And that's true. If I find $5 on the ground, and then I lose $5 10 minutes later, I still have nothing, which is a bummer. Then we have the inverse property of multiplication. This one gets a little bit more tricky just because there's different ways that you're going to see this property. The inverse property tells us that if you take any number and multiply it by its inverse, you will still get 1. And it looks a little bit complicated. It's really not. Let's try plugging in a number and seeing what happens here. Let's say x equals 3. So we're going to put in 3, copy the multiplication sign, times 1 over 3 equals 1. Still not sure if that's true. In order to solve this properly, we need to change this 3, that's a whole number, into an improper fraction. To do that, we're just going to put the whole number over 1. Now, we have 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. Those actually cancel each other out. Let's show the math behind why they cancel each other out. You might just want to cancel them out and write little 1s next to them. But what you're really doing, 3 times 1 is 3, 1 times 3 is 3, and because 3 over 3 is a fractional 1, that actually equals 1 over 1, which equals 1. If you divide 3 divided by 3, you will get 1, which is why the inverse property of multiplication, works. Let's take a look at one more example of this, because when you see it in fractions, it does look a little bit different. For the inverse property of multiplication, if I have 2/5 times, now its inverse is actually just going to be the reciprocal, which is the flip-flop of the fraction. The property says that this will equal 1. Let's show the math behind it. You have a 2 on top and a 2 on bottom. You have a 5 on top and a 5 on bottom. So when you cancel those out, all you're left with are 1s. So the property is true. 2 over 5 times 5 over 2, which is its reciprocal, is 1. You could also show it by multiplying and not canceling out on top. 2 times 5 is 10. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 over 10 is the same as 1 whole.